I spent 7 years caring for our mother as Alzheimer's stole her day by day. My sister Rachel? She lived out of state, called maybe twice a year, never once came home. But after Mom passed, Rachel showed up smiling, holding legal papers that claimed she owned the house. The same house I thought we'd share, just like Mom always said. Turns out, my sister had forged a signature. And once I started digging, I realized that stealing the house was only the beginning. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted most, this story will hit close to home. Let me know in the comments if you've faced anything like this. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Your voice matters more than you think. She was my mother, and for a long time, I was the only one who remembered who she used to be. When our mother was first diagnosed with early-onset Alzheimer's, I was 33 and working as a full-time librarian in our small Ohio town. Rachel, my older sister, lived in Chicago at the time. She called to say she was sorry, that she'd help out however she could. But from the very beginning, it was clear that her version of helping meant calling every few months and sending birthday flowers. I quit my job 6 months after the diagnosis. At first, Mom was still herself in pieces. She'd forget the oven was on or where she left her phone, but she still laughed at my jokes and remembered the name of my cat. But within a year, I became her full-time caregiver. Her confusion deepened, her world shrank, and mine did too. I turned down job offers, romantic relationships, trips, and freedom, because I couldn't leave her alone. I bathed her, fed her, changed her clothes. I took her to her appointments, fought insurance companies, and researched every holistic treatment under the sun, desperate to hold on to her just a little longer. And through it all, Rachel stayed gone. She'd show up maybe once a year, looking polished and burdened by her own schedule, dropping in with gifts that felt like guilt wrapped in tissue paper. A new scarf, a fancy candle, a self-care book for me that she clearly hadn't read herself. Then she'd be gone again by morning, always with some excuse. The firm needs me, or Jason has a conference, or flights were impossible this weekend. She never cleaned up after Mom. Never saw the moments where Mom cried and asked me if she was dying. Never watched her forget her own birthday, or call me by someone else's name, or scream at her reflection in the mirror. I used to get angry, then numb. Eventually, I just stopped expecting anything. But there was one thing I held on to, something Mom had said again and again, even before her memory started to fade. "This house belongs to both my girls," she'd say. "When I'm gone, it'll be yours together. Split it evenly. I want you to look after each other." It was the only thing she was ever firm about. She'd written it down years ago, on a printed will, updated before she got sick, naming both of us as equal beneficiaries. We kept it in the file cabinet in her bedroom, behind the tax returns and insurance papers. I saw it plenty of times when I was reorganizing her records or looking for her medical history. So even as she declined and everything around me began to blur into caretaking and grief, I clung to that. Her wish, her words, that this house would stay in our family, split evenly, just like she'd wanted. When Mom passed, I was 40. Rachel flew in for the funeral with her husband and 2 kids in tow, wearing black like a costume and crying politely for the people around her. She hugged me stiffly and asked, "How are you holding up?" I didn't know how to answer. I hadn't really slept in 4 days. Grief felt like a second skin, one I hadn't figured out how to shed yet. We stood together after the service, just the 2 of us. For a brief moment, I thought, maybe, just maybe, this would bring us closer. That we could finally talk, really talk, without all the distance between us. That was the last time I believed she cared. 3 days later, I came home from running errands, trying to cancel medical subscriptions, sorting out bank accounts, the grim to-do list of the newly grieving, and I found Rachel sitting at the kitchen table with a man I didn't know. He had a clipboard and a fake smile. Rachel had a folder open in front of her and a latte in hand. "This is Carl," she said brightly. "He's with the real estate office. I've already signed the listing agreement." I blinked. "Listing what?" She tapped the folder. "The house. I've already found a buyer. It's a great deal. You'll get a small portion, of course, but since it's in my name..." I didn't even hear the rest. "In your name?" I asked, stunned. "What are you talking about? The house is Mom's. She wanted us to split it." Rachel looked at me like I was a child. "It was transferred to me months ago. She signed it. It's all been handled. I have the documents." I wanted to scream. I wanted to cry. Instead, I walked to the bedroom, yanked open the file cabinet, and found the will was gone. Every document in that drawer had been rifled through, and the file marked estate planning was missing entirely. My heart pounded. I turned back to the kitchen and looked my sister in the eye. She smiled, thin, smug, like she knew I couldn't do a thing. But she was wrong. Grief can cloud your judgment, but betrayal? That wakes you up. I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake in the room that used to be Mom's, the one I hadn't been able to step into since the funeral. The scent of lavender lotion still lingered on her pillows. Her reading glasses were folded neatly on the nightstand, right where I'd left them after she passed. But now, all I could think about was Rachel. The way she smiled. The way she spoke to that real estate agent like this was some kind of casual business transaction. The way she said, "It's in my name." My mind spun. When had this happened? How had this happened? I had been with Mom nearly every single day. I'd seen the good days, the bad days, and the terrifying ones in between. I knew when she could no longer recognize her neighbors. I knew when she forgot how to use a microwave. I knew she hadn't signed anything in the final year of her life. She could barely hold a pen straight. So how did Rachel have a signed deed? I got out of bed at 3 a.m. and pulled out my laptop. I logged into the county records site and started digging. And there it was, a transfer of deed, dated 9 months before Mom passed. It showed Mom signing the house over to Rachel, in exchange for $1 and love and affection. I felt sick. But the signature, something was off. The way her name was written, too clean, too consistent. It didn't match the shaky, slanted script Mom's handwriting had become in her final year. I'd seen her struggle just to sign her own name at doctor's appointments. There was no way she wrote this. At least, not on her own. The next morning, I called the local notary listed on the document, a woman named Nancy Collins. I pretended to be settling final affairs and asked if she remembered notarizing a transfer of property for my mother. "Oh yes," she said, cheerful and unaware. "I remember your sister Rachel brought her in. Sweet woman, your mom was very quiet that day, but everything seemed in order. We went through the paperwork quickly." "Did she say anything? My mom?" There was a pause. Not much, to be honest. Rachel said she was having a rough day. I didn't think much of it." That was when it clicked. My mother hadn't agreed to anything. Rachel had dragged her to that notary's office during a state of cognitive confusion. And Nancy? She hadn't asked for a doctor's clearance or proof of mental capacity. She just stamped and signed. But here's the thing. Mom was in the hospital the entire week that document was dated. I remembered it clearly because she'd developed a urinary tract infection that spiraled into hallucinations. I'd slept on a cot next to her hospital bed for 4 days straight. So how could she have walked into a notary's office and signed legal paperwork? She hadn't. Rachel had forged it. Or coerced her. Maybe both. And now I had something more powerful than grief. Proof of fraud in the making. I dug through the file cabinet again and found an old envelope addressed to our cousin, signed by Mom 3 years prior. The signature was messy, but unmistakably hers. I scanned it and began comparing it to the signature on the deed. They didn't match. I called her neurologist next. Dr. Miller had been kind, gentle, and thorough through Mom's decline. I explained the situation and asked, carefully, if he could provide a statement about Mom's condition around the date the house was supposedly transferred. He didn't even hesitate. She was declared legally incapacitated 4 months before that date, he said firmly. She couldn't legally consent to anything, and that's in her medical file. My fingers gripped the phone tightly. Would you be willing to provide that in writing? I'll draft it this afternoon. I hung up and sat in stunned silence. This wasn't just sibling rivalry, this was fraud. Rachel had exploited a sick woman, our mother, for profit. She had manipulated a system, forged a signature, and tried to erase me from a home I gave my entire adult life to preserve. The betrayal hit me in waves, 1 minute cold and hollow, the next white-hot rage. I thought of Mom, in her final days, holding my hand and whispering, "You're such a good daughter." I thought of Rachel's smirk when she waved that contract in front of me. I thought of the promise. Split it evenly. Look after each other. Rachel hadn't just stolen a house. She'd stolen Mom's last wish. That night, I called a local attorney named Martin Glassman. He specialized in elder abuse and estate fraud. I told him everything, what I'd found, what I suspected, and what I had in hand. After a long pause, he said, "Lila, this isn't just unethical. If what you're saying is accurate, and it sounds like it is, your sister could be in serious legal trouble. You did the right thing by calling me." And just like that, the fog began to lift. I wasn't helpless. I wasn't just the grieving daughter or the forgotten sister. I was going to fight back. And this time, Rachel wouldn't see it coming. Martin Glassman didn't look like the kind of man you'd expect to bring down a fraudster. He was in his early 60s, wore suspenders instead of a belt, and had an ancient coffee mug that read, "I sue people," in faded block letters. But within 10 minutes of hearing my story, he was all business. "We'll need everything," he said, flipping open a legal pad. "Every document you have, photos, emails, texts, the notarization record, medical statements, and a copy of the will, if you can find it." "I think Rachel took it," I admitted. "She must have gone through the file cabinet before I got home." He didn't flinch. "We'll get it through discovery later. For now, focus on what you can control." I started making a list. The forged signature, the hospital records, the doctor's statement, the notary's call log, old birthday cards Mom signed. Anything that could prove one undeniable thing. My mother was not of sound mind when that deed was signed, and Rachel knew it. That night, I went through every drawer, every box in the attic, every dusty bin in the garage. I found an envelope Mom had signed back in 2019, her handwriting shaky but real. I found a get well card addressed to our neighbor, and even the hospital intake form from the week she'd been admitted. The same week Rachel claimed Mom had shown up to sign legal documents. The more I dug, the more confident I became. I wasn't just chasing justice, I was documenting the truth. Meanwhile, Martin started drafting a formal letter to Rachel, a cease and desist, demanding an immediate freeze on the property sale due to evidence of fraud and elder coercion. He filed a motion for injunction the next day, blocking any transfer of ownership until the matter could be reviewed in court. Rachel didn't respond right away, but I knew she'd gotten the message. The smile she'd worn at the kitchen table, that smug little smirk, I imagined it cracking just a little. I also reached back out to Nancy, the notary. This time I asked her, gently, if she had a record of what ID Mom had used that day. She paused, then admitted she hadn't copied the ID, just noted State ID OH in her logbook. That sloppiness might have saved Rachel before, but it was going to crush her case now. Martin filed a formal complaint with the Ohio Notary Commission. It wouldn't make the documents disappear, but it cast serious doubt on their validity. And more importantly, it showed that we weren't going away quietly. For the next few weeks, I became obsessed. I read legal blogs, researched case studies on probate fraud, Even joined a Facebook group for adult children caring for parents with dementia. I posted a cautious summary of my situation, leaving out names and locations, and was flooded with responses. "You're not alone," one woman wrote. "My brother did the same thing. My uncle forged our dad's will. My aunt changed the deed while mom was in hospice." It was heartbreaking, but it was also energizing. I wasn't just fighting for my family anymore. I was fighting against a pattern. A system that let people like Rachel smile through funerals and steal with pens instead of knives. Martin and I worked quietly but relentlessly. He prepared an emergency petition for the probate court, challenging the deed transfer on grounds of fraud and undue influence. We gathered sworn affidavits from Mom's doctors and neighbors. Even the hospice nurse remembered Rachel visiting just once, for less than 15 minutes. "She didn't even stay for lunch," the nurse said in her affidavit. "Just asked if the house was in her name yet." It was all falling into place, but the most damning piece came from an unexpected source. One day, while digging through Rachel's old Instagram posts, yes, I'd resorted to social media stalking, I found a video from 10 months ago. A casual brunch with friends, mimosas, laughter, sunlight. And in the background, her voice. "Why should I ask permission from someone who can't even spell her own name anymore?" She laughed. She didn't even know what planet she was on. The video only lasted 5 seconds before cutting off, but it was enough. I screen recorded it, sent it to Martin. He wrote back 2 words. "She's done." 3 days after Martin filed the emergency motion, Rachel called me. Not texted, not emailed, called. I almost didn't pick up, but curiosity won out over spite. Her voice was tight, clipped, like someone trying to smile through gritted teeth. "Lila, I just got word from the court. What the hell are you doing?" "I think that's obvious," I replied calmly. "I'm protecting what's ours. What was Mom's?" "You're blowing this out of proportion. You have no idea what it takes to manage a property sale. I handled it because you were overwhelmed." "Overwhelmed?" I laughed. "You mean grieving? After caring for her every single day while you lived your life?" She didn't answer that. Instead, she switched tactics. "Look," she said, "why don't we talk about this like adults? No need to drag it through court. I'm willing to give you a payout. Generous even. Let's be reasonable." There it was, the shift from arrogance to fear. I didn't answer her offer. I let the silence stretch long enough to make her squirm, then simply said, "You'll hear from my lawyer," and hung up. The next day, Martin received an email from her attorney, a man clearly caught off guard. He tried to argue the documents were valid and that I was delaying the grieving process with my accusations. Martin responded with a 30-page brief, attached with affidavits, medical records, screenshots, and that Instagram video. By the end of the week, the court had officially scheduled a hearing. A full review of the deed transfer, the notarization, and whether undue influence had occurred. In the meantime, the house sale was halted. No movement, no contracts, no profit for Rachel. I could practically hear her screaming into her $2,200 throw pillows, but it didn't stop there. The Ohio Notary Commission reached out to Nancy Collins, the notary, for a formal inquiry. She panicked. I heard through Martin's investigator that she admitted, under pressure, that Rachel had rushed her through the process and that Mom had appeared confused and mostly silent. Even worse, Nancy confessed she hadn't properly verified identification, just trusted Rachel. That admission alone cast enough doubt to raise flags across the board. Martin took it further. He contacted the hospital where Mom had been staying the week the deed was supposedly signed. We obtained video surveillance timestamps that showed her being treated at the facility on the very same day she was allegedly in the notary's office. It was game over. Martin smiled for the first time since we started. "You don't just have a civil case, Lila. You have a criminal one. We filed a formal complaint for elder fraud with the state attorney's office. And for the first time in this entire ordeal, someone else besides me started treating Rachel like the criminal she had become. Rachel tried to delay the hearing, claimed she needed time to gather records, claimed she'd been unaware of Mom's declining condition. She even attempted to paint me as unstable, said that I'd become obsessed after Mom died and was trying to punish her out of jealousy. But the evidence didn't lie. Her video, the conflicting medical timeline, the sudden disappearance of the will, the notarization gaps, the hospital surveillance, all of it formed a noose around her version of events. And quietly, behind the scenes, Martin and I prepared our final punch. A full petition for financial restitution, not just to reverse the deed transfer, but to demand Rachel pay damages for emotional distress, legal costs, and breach of fiduciary duty. She thought this would be a quick profit. A signature here, a document there, and boom, she'd get the house, the money, and maybe a few awkward holidays to endure. What she got instead was me. Not the quiet sister, not the caregiver, not the girl who always kept the peace. She got the version of me that had nothing left to lose, the one who buried her mother and came back stronger. And Rachel? She was just beginning to understand what that meant. Watching Rachel squirm was just the beginning, and trust me, it only gets better from here. If you've ever seen someone try to steal from their own family, share your story below. And if you're rooting for Lila, hit that like button and subscribe, because justice is just getting started. The courthouse was small, just 2 stories of old red brick and narrow hallways that smelled faintly of paper and floor wax. But to me, it felt like the setting of a showdown. Martin and I arrived early, documents in hand, everything neatly labeled in his overstuffed accordion folder. He wore his usual suspenders and brought a reusable coffee mug that read, "Justice takes time." I was grateful for his calm, methodical presence. He didn't hype me up or sugarcoat things. He just reminded me, as he always did, that the truth was on our side. We waited in a quiet corner of the hallway while the other cases were called. I could feel my heartbeat in my neck. Across from us, Rachel sat in a charcoal gray suit that looked expensive and stiff. Her hair was perfect, her expression composed, but I saw the twitch in her jaw. Her lawyer sat beside her, flipping through papers a little too quickly. She looked at me once, just once. No smile this time, just a flash of something that might have been nerves, or fury, or both. As we waited, Martin leaned toward me. "The judge on this case is sharp. She doesn't like grandstanding, just facts. We stick to the documents, the timeline, and the expert statements. Let Rachel get emotional. If she tries to argue on feelings, we've already won." I nodded, gripping the pen in my hand like a lifeline. In the days leading up to the hearing, Martin had assembled everything like a slow-moving avalanche. First came the expert declaration from Dr. Miller, Mom's neurologist, confirming that at the time of the deed transfer, my mother was legally incapacitated and medically unfit to consent to any legal transaction. Then came the notary admission, Nancy Collins's written statement acknowledging that she had not verified proper ID and had relied on Rachel's verbal assurances. The hospital's surveillance footage, while grainy, showed a timestamp of Mom being helped to the bathroom by a nurse on the exact date and time she supposedly signed the deed. And finally, we had the pièce de résistance, the 5-second Instagram clip where Rachel laughed and said, "Why should I ask permission from someone who can't even spell her name?" We transcribed it, timestamped it, matched it to her location data. It was airtight. Martin had also filed a motion requesting that Rachel be held personally liable for any proceeds already collected or attempted through the fraudulent deed. And while this wasn't a criminal trial yet, he had notified the district attorney's office about the elder fraud component. It was more than a confrontation. It was the beginning of her unraveling. I wasn't walking into that courtroom alone. I had my mother's voice behind me, her doctors, her nurses, her friends, and the hundreds of days and nights I'd sat by her side when no one else had. This wasn't just about a house. This was about memory, about care, about justice. The bailiff finally called our case. My stomach flipped, but I stood tall. As I walked into that courtroom, I didn't feel like a victim anymore. I felt ready. The fundraiser that night was the most important event of the year. A high-profile gala hosted by Rachel's Foundation, with press coverage, local celebrities, and major donors all under one roof. Lila arrived early, calm and collected in a sleek navy dress, her hair pinned up in a no-nonsense bun. She looked every bit the grieving daughter, and something more, determined, ready. Rachel floated around the ballroom like royalty, basking in the spotlight. Her speech was set to begin at 8 o'clock sharp, but at 7:45, a low hum of murmurs began near the back of the room. Someone had placed glossy folders on every table, and curious hands were already flipping them open. Each folder contained neatly collated copies of financial statements from the estate, side by side with Rachel's personal foundation ledgers. Highlighted sections showed glaring discrepancies. A cover letter, signed by Lila, titled, "In Honor of David Hartwell, the Truth He Deserved," explained in crisp language how Rachel had redirected over $300,000 of estate assets into her private accounts under the guise of charitable operations. By 7:50, Rachel's smile had started to fade. She caught on quickly. Lila watched from the side of the room, arms crossed, expression unreadable. Then Rachel's assistant rushed up to her, folder in hand, whispering furiously in her ear. Panic. Rachel grabbed the mic early, hoping to speak before the rumors fully erupted. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice tight. "Before we begin, I want to personally thank—" She never got to finish. A well-known journalist from the local news team stood up and asked loudly, "Would you care to comment on these documents, Ms. Hartwell? The ones showing embezzlement from your late husband's estate?" A collective gasp rippled through the audience. Rachel froze. Her face flushed a deep crimson. This is absurd," she sputtered. "These are lies, fabricated by someone desperate and vindictive." Lila stepped forward, folder in hand, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. "They're not lies," she said, her voice steady and clear. "They're evidence, verified by an independent CPA. You stole from my father's estate, from me, from the charities you pretended to support." The room fell into stunned silence. A few board members of Rachel's foundation rose and slowly walked away. One of the donors, red-faced and shaking his head, tossed his check back onto the table. Rachel tried to rally, but her voice cracked. "You don't understand. David wanted me to manage things. He trusted me." "No," Lila replied, locking eyes with her. "He trusted you to love his daughter like your own. Instead, you saw me as a threat, and made sure I paid for it." Security escorted Rachel out moments later, under the flashing lights of cell phone cameras. The following morning, local headlines exploded with the story. Wife of late philanthropist accused of embezzlement, stepdaughter exposes fraud at gala. And just like that, the Queen lost her crown. Publicly. Permanently. The silence that followed Rachel's outburst in the courtroom was deafening. For a moment, all Lila could hear was the rustle of papers, the clack of a gavel, and her own heartbeat steadying as the judge turned his gaze from Rachel's crumbling composure to Lila's unwavering stance. Rachel had expected chaos, expected to wield power with her shrill claims and dramatics. But what she faced was order, facts, and the burden of her own arrogance. The judge ruled in favor of Lila. The forged amendment was deemed null, and the original will was restored, giving Lila full control of her late father's estate, business shares, and the lakefront house. Rachel, once dripping with smug entitlement, was ordered to vacate the property within 30 days. Her attempt at fraud not only stripped her of everything she tried to steal, it opened the door for a potential criminal investigation, something Lila made sure to press with the district attorney. But Lila wasn't finished. In the weeks following the ruling, she didn't celebrate. She didn't pop champagne or gloat. Instead, she quietly went to work rebuilding what her father had left behind. She fired the slimy business partner who had helped Rachel cover up the fraudulent documents. She brought in a new accountant, reviewed every transaction, and created a small scholarship fund in her father's name for first-generation college students. Then came the property. Lila stood in the middle of the lakefront house, a place that once felt like a ghost of her childhood, haunted by Rachel's perfume and false sweetness. She ripped down the curtains Rachel had installed, repainted every wall, and removed the tacky faux chandeliers Rachel had chosen in her delusions of grandeur. It was therapeutic, in a strange way. Every room she reclaimed felt like another step toward healing. Rachel, meanwhile, had gone radio silent. Her name dragged through court records and gossip blogs after Lila made sure the truth was public. The very social circles Rachel used to flaunt were now whispering behind her back. Her reputation was in ruins, and she could no longer rely on charm or crocodile tears to win over sympathy. One day, Lila ran into Rachel by chance, outside a local pharmacy. Rachel looked worn down, almost unrecognizable. Her designer bags traded for an old purse, her heels replaced by scuffed-up sneakers. She stared at Lila with a flash of something between hatred and shame. But Lila didn't flinch. She gave her a small nod, not out of pity, but out of finality. There was nothing more to say. The war was over. Later that evening, as Lila sat on the back porch of the restored lake house, she opened the last letter her father had ever written to her, the one she'd found hidden behind an old photo in the attic. "If you're reading this, it means I didn't do enough while I was alive. But you, my daughter, have always been stronger than I ever was. Don't let anyone take what's yours, not even the ones who smile while doing it." She folded the letter and looked out over the water, calm and unbroken. The storm had passed. In the weeks that followed the courtroom verdict, a strange stillness settled over Lila's life. For the first time in years, she didn't wake up with a lump in her throat or a legal document to study. She wasn't plotting, anticipating, or retaliating. Instead, she was simply breathing. The farmhouse felt different now, lighter, as if the very walls had exhaled after holding in generations of secrets. She spent long afternoons tending to the garden her father once loved, now overrun with weeds. With her son Nathan beside her, pulling out roots and planting new life, it became more than a chore. It became a ritual of renewal. "Grandpa would have liked this," Nathan said one morning, holding up a freshly potted lavender sprig. Lila smiled, kneeling beside him in the soil. "He would have loved it, sweetheart. He would have loved seeing you here." There were still shadows, of course. The local gossip hadn't faded. Some sympathized with Rachel. Others were shocked by the truth. But for the first time, Lila didn't feel the need to explain herself to anyone. The truth was out, and that was enough. Rachel had gone quiet. She sold the house in town, the one she'd decorated with Lila's inheritance, and moved 2 states away. The last Lila heard, she was working part-time in a boutique and renting a condo. It wasn't ruin, but it wasn't royalty either. Lila didn't hate her, not anymore. She pitied her, in the quiet way one might pity a moth forever flying toward the wrong light. One afternoon, while sorting through old photo boxes in the attic, Lila found a dusty envelope labeled in her father's shaky handwriting. "For Lila, when the time is right." Inside was a single note. "You are stronger than you think. I failed you in my silence, but never in my love. I only hope someday you'll understand why I chose peace over conflict. You chose the truth, and for that, I am proud." She wept that night, not from pain, but release, for all the things she'd lost, and all the pieces she'd put back together. In time, Lila returned to the local community college where she once taught part-time. She started a small workshop for single mothers on legal literacy, financial independence, and emotional recovery. Women showed up from all corners of the county. They came broken, silent, confused, and they left with fire in their eyes. Lila didn't just rebuild her life, she turned it into a lighthouse. She never needed a courtroom to validate her strength. But now that she had it, she used it for others. Sometimes, late at night, she would sit on the porch with a cup of tea, listening to the wind rustling through the trees. Nathan asleep upstairs, the garden growing silently in the dark, the stars overhead, vast and eternal. She had weathered the storm, and now, beneath the quiet night sky, Lila finally knew peace. Not the kind you beg for, but the kind you earn.